He left $20,000 right in the middle of the main bedroom, just to see whether the cleaner would steal it or not. But that woman did something that brought the billionaire to his knees before a truth he never saw coming. In the snow-covered slopes of Aspen, within the luxurious and silent space of a sprawling mansion, lived a man surrounded by wealth, yet missing the most important thing: trust in people. Ethan Caldwell, a 42-year-old real estate tycoon, was once someone who believed that everyone had a good side. But after more than a decade of being betrayed by the very people who worked for him, that belief slowly turned to ashes. For 15 years, any new employee who stepped into this house had to undergo a ruthless test they never knew existed. $20,000 in cash, casually placed on a walnut table in the main bedroom. No lock, no concealment, not a single instruction. Only silence, and a half-closed door where Ethan stood watching. And every single one of them, from drivers, chefs, assistants, to housekeepers, failed. They always thought no one saw them, but Ethan did. And every time, a part of his trust died a little more. Until this morning. A silhouette appeared at the iron gate. Lena Brooks, 35, is a single mother who works as a part-time cleaner. An old car, a simple uniform, worn-out shoes. But in her eyes was something Ethan hadn't seen in years. Dignity. Ethan looked out the window and quietly sighed. Another test, he thought, and I already know the result. Or do I? He had no idea that today, this ordinary woman would shatter his entire worldview, only to rebuild it with something he thought he had lost forever. Trust. Lena's old sedan stopped at the stone-paved road leading to the mansion. The icy wind from the Rocky Mountains blew past, carrying thin trails of snow. But her footsteps remained steady, as if she had long been familiar with winters colder than this. She stood at the door, adjusted the collar of her uniform, took a deep breath, then rang the bell. It wasn't nervousness, it was respect for the job she was about to do. The door opened. Ethan Caldwell appeared at the entrance himself, something almost no one had ever seen. Lena bowed her head slightly. "Good morning, Mr. Caldwell. I'm Lena Brooks." Ethan nodded faintly, his eyes quietly observing every detail. The way she stood with a straight back, the way she held her gaze, the way her hands were gently clasped together out of politeness. There was no awkwardness of someone afraid, nor the forced charm of someone trying to impress, only dignity and humility. He invited her inside. The mansion was so vast that footsteps echoed through the space. Lena glanced at the large glass windows overlooking a snow-covered valley, at the oil paintings on the wall, and at the piano, polished to perfection so that it reflected the morning light. But she didn't marvel. She simply observed, as if mapping out the tasks she would need to do. Ethan led her through the living room, the kitchen, then up the long staircase to the upper floor. "The job is simple," Ethan said quietly. 3 times a week. And my bedroom needs special care. Lena nodded. "Yes, sir. I'll do my best." Ethan stopped in front of the main bedroom door. His hand touched the doorknob, but he didn't open it fully. He turned to Lena. "Take your time. I'll be downstairs in my office." A gentle sentence, but behind it was a test, an old wound, and a suspicion that had dragged on for 15 long years. When Lena stepped into the room, Ethan didn't go to his office, as he had said. He stood inside the built-in closet, in the dark, motionless, listening. Lena's footsteps sounded across the wooden floor, then the sound of her placing her toolbox down. Then a stretch of silence lasting 3 seconds. 3 seconds that made Ethan's heart tighten. 3 seconds for a person to decide, take it or not. It was the moment Ethan tensed completely, because he believed he already knew the outcome. But what he didn't know was that, just a few minutes later, fate would give him an answer, utterly different from anything he had believed for the past 15 relentless years. The main bedroom door opened slightly. Lena stepped in, her shoes touching the polished walnut floor gently. Sunlight from the large window cast a long streak across the table where the stack of $20,000 lay exposed like a challenge. Lena froze immediately. Time seemed to slow. She looked at the $100 bills scattered across the table, messy as if a storm had just swept through. The glass cleaner bottle slipped from her fingers and fell onto the carpet with a soft thud that somehow felt cold. Behind the door of the built-in closet, Ethan held his breath. He had seen this scene dozens of times. The first expression was always the same: surprise, then hesitation, then greed, and finally the hands reaching out, quick, clumsy, but full of determination. He almost whispered in his mind, "Just like everyone else." But Lena didn't touch the money. Not immediately. She stepped closer, sat on the edge of the table as if she were looking at something far more important than the cash radiating temptation. She took a deep breath. Not desire, but fear. Fear of what? Ethan didn't know, but the woman standing before him was unlike anyone who had ever stood in that spot. Lena reached out, but not to pocket the money. She gathered each bill, smoothed every edge, arranged them into neat, organized stacks, so precise that Ethan frowned. Not the movements of a thief, but of someone who respected what did not belong to her. She counted softly. 100, 200, 300. Her voice was steady but faintly trembling, not from greed, but not to avoid being misunderstood. Lena reached into her uniform pocket and pulled out a small, worn notebook. Its cover was frayed at the corners. She wrote, "Found $20,000 on the table, organized and left in the same place." Ethan was stunned. He had prepared for every scenario, except this one. Then Lena closed the notebook and set her pen down. She clasped her hands, bowed her head slightly, eyes closed. Ethan held his breath. Lena whispered, her voice soft as a breeze. "Thank you, Lord, for giving me honest work. Please keep my heart upright even when no one is watching." A prayer, simple, sincere, and so beautiful that it made the entire room feel brighter. After that, she stood up and continued cleaning, as if what had just happened was nothing special. But to Ethan, it was the most extraordinary thing he had witnessed in years of living in suspicion. He pressed a trembling hand against the closet wall, not out of anger, but because of a feeling he thought had died long ago. Hope. From that fateful morning onward, the vast mansion seemed to carry a different atmosphere. It wasn't a change brought by furniture or the light passing through the glass windows. It came from Lena's quiet, steady presence. She worked as if every small corner of the house had a soul and deserved to be treated kindly. Every step she took was gentle and careful. Every action came from a deep respect for the job she was doing. Sometimes she noticed a loose door hinge. Without anyone telling her, she picked up a screwdriver and tightened it herself. When she saw dust stuck deep between the grooves of a bookshelf, she used a soft brush to clean every line. A curtain misaligned by just a few centimeters. She quietly climbed onto a chair to fix it back into place. Ethan watched from a distance, more than once wondering why an ordinary woman like Lena could bring such devotion into even the smallest of tasks. She didn't do it because someone was watching. She didn't do it for praise. She did it because she believed it was the right thing to do. And to Ethan, that was worth more than anything money had ever bought him. Sometimes when Lena was getting ready to leave, they shared short conversations at the doorway. Nothing elaborate, but enough for Ethan to see the most genuine parts of who she was. One day he asked, "How long have you been doing this job, Lena?" Lena smiled softly, a gentle smile, but full of pride. 5 years now, sir. It's tough, but honest. I'm grateful I can raise my son with my own hard work. Ethan fell silent. To him, her words were simple but carried the weight of lead. After so many years living in luxury, he had never heard anyone speak about labor with such pride. In his world, people boasted about their wealth, success, and assets. But Lena, she took pride in honesty. One afternoon, Ethan tested her again, not out of suspicion, but because he wanted to be sure he wasn't placing his trust in the wrong place. He left a wallet with $800 on the living room table. No cameras, no monitoring, just him, and a faint fear that his hope would be crushed again like every time before. When Ethan returned, the wallet was gone. His chest tightened for a split second, but then he saw a small note placed neatly on the table. Found the wallet, put it in the second drawer to keep it safe. Lena. Ethan's eyes paused on the line of handwriting. A strange feeling rose within him, soft and warm, like a rare strand of winter sunlight slipping through the glass. It had been so long. It had been so long since he had allowed himself to trust anyone. Yet Lena, with only a few simple actions, had done something that wealthy, educated, high-status people had never been able to do. She restored his faith. Every day Lena worked as if it were just routine, but to Ethan, every small gesture she made felt like a gentle touch on the dark corners he had hidden away from the light. She didn't know she was healing someone. She didn't know her honesty was shaking a heart that had grown cold. Ethan knew, and he found himself smiling more often whenever he saw her step through the door of that house. One late weekend afternoon, while Lena was rearranging a drawer in the living room, Ethan's phone rang with a long, heavy tone. He looked at the screen, his brows tightening slightly. A name appeared that he neither expected nor wanted to see, but he still picked up. On the other end was a familiar voice, soft, but carrying that faint artificial sweetness he once knew all too well. "Ethan, it's me, Amber." Ethan stood still for a few seconds. Amber. The woman who once walked red carpets, appeared in major fashion campaigns, and had left him without hesitation to follow a younger, richer billionaire. That same woman was calling him now. "I came back," Amber continued, "and I want to talk. I made a mistake." Ethan didn't answer right away. Amber's voice was still beautiful, but something within it felt tired and unsteady. "Can I stay for a few days? You know, things over there weren't what I thought." A long silence lingered. Finally, Ethan spoke softly. "All right, but only for a few days." At that moment, Lena walked past the living room doorway and caught Ethan's weighted glance. She didn't ask anything, didn't pry. She simply bowed her head gently as a greeting. But she could sense that something had shifted in the air. That evening, as Lena was preparing to leave, she paused at the door, holding a pair of slightly damp cleaning gloves. "If you need more privacy in the next few days," Lena said gently but firmly, "I can adjust my schedule." Ethan turned to look at her. Her eyes were neither curious nor judgmental, only respectfully calm. He nodded lightly. "That won't be necessary, Lena. Just keep your regular routine." Lena smiled, the kind of smile Ethan had realized made his house feel less empty these past weeks. Then she walked away, leaving behind the cold afternoon air and a silence he couldn't quite name. The next morning, the sound of a luxury car engine gliding over snow signaled Amber's arrival. She stepped out with 2 designer suitcases, a thick fur coat, and the faint scent of expensive perfume drifting in the breeze. The house seemed to shift the moment she stepped inside. Amber threw her arms around Ethan as if the distance between them had never existed. "Ethan, I missed you," she said, standing a little too close. Ethan straightened, neither rejecting nor returning the gesture warmly. At the end of the hallway, Lena appeared, holding a kitchen towel. "Good morning, Mr. Caldwell," she said softly, as she always did. Amber shot Lena a glance, quick, sharp, cold. The look of someone accustomed to standing above others, to being served. "She is?" Amber asked. "Lena," Ethan answered. "The cleaner." Amber nodded slightly, but her eyes carried the same judgment Lena had seen from certain people, those who believed a person's worth was measured by the car they drove, not by how they lived. Lena gave a polite smile, bowed, then quietly walked away. She didn't know that from that moment on, the fragile peace in the house had begun to tremble. She didn't know that the woman who had just stepped inside brought not only luggage with her, but also jealousy, arrogance, and a storm waiting for the right moment to break. And she had no idea that she, an ordinary woman, would soon become the center of that storm. Ever since Amber stepped into the mansion, the house seemed to breathe differently. It no longer held the warm quietness that Lena had unknowingly brought with her, but a kind of noise hidden beneath perfume, the clacking of heels and deliberate sighs. Amber had the habit of walking through each room as if she owned it, even though Ethan himself wasn't entirely comfortable with her return yet. On Monday morning, while Ethan was drinking his hot coffee in the kitchen, Amber appeared with perfectly styled hair and confidently red lips. But the moment her eyes landed on Lena, who was carefully cleaning cup handles at the sink, her expression shifted. Not outright hostility, but that soft, sharp, cold assessment, the kind people use when looking at something they believe doesn't belong in the same space as expensive furniture. "Could you clean the dining table again, please?" Amber said. Her voice was gentle, but every word felt like an order. Lena turned, offering a professional smile. "Yes, ma'am." But Amber didn't stop. "Oh, and the wine shelf, and the picture frame. And you should probably change the way you fold the towels. They aren't exactly aligned." From behind, Ethan set his coffee cup down, slightly more complicated than usual. "Amber, she's doing just fine." Amber turned with a sweet smile. "I just want things perfect. Isn't that what you've always liked?" Ethan didn't respond. Lena bowed her head and continued working without reacting. No resentment, no discomfort, just a calmness. A calmness that irritated Amber more than resistance ever could. All morning, Amber moved through the house like a royal cat, keeping her eyes on Lena's every step. Each time, Ethan watched more closely. And slowly, he began to understand. Amber wasn't upset because a towel was folded an inch off. She was upset because of Lena's presence. A woman who wasn't trying to prove anything, but who carried something Amber could never touch. Dignity. By afternoon, when Lena was rearranging books on a shelf, Ethan stood at the doorway. "Thank you for today," he said softly. Lena looked up, slightly surprised. "Oh, sir, I'm just doing my job." "No, I mean, thank you for keeping that attitude." "What attitude, sir?" "Calm," Ethan answered quietly. "And kind." Lena smiled, a smile that made the room feel a little brighter. "I can't control how others treat me, sir, but I can always control how I respond." Ethan looked at her for a long moment. A simple sentence, yet it touched the deepest part of him, the part he had let gather dust for years. Across the hallway, Amber stood partially hidden behind a column, hearing the entire exchange. A cold, unreadable smile appeared on her lips. Not because she was jealous, but because she had realized something. Ethan looked at Lena in a way he had never looked at her. Not with infatuation, not with romantic interest, but with respect. And for people like Amber, respect could be more dangerous than love. That night, as snow fell gently outside the window, Amber stepped into Ethan's study. The warm lamplight cast a glow on her face, an elegant beauty but devoid of softness. "Ethan," she said, her voice soft enough to dissolve into the air. "I feel like you're different." Ethan paused his typing. "Different? What makes you think that?" "You're distant. You talk less, and—" Amber hesitated for a moment, then sighed. "You care about that cleaning woman a bit too much." Ethan turned fully toward her. "Amber, don't say that. She's just someone doing her job well." Amber smiled, but her eyes were sharp enough to cut stone. "Just remember to keep your distance. People from lower classes, they tend to misunderstand kindness." A light sentence, but it sliced through the air like a thin blade. Ethan stared at Amber for a long, long moment. Not because he was angry, but because he realized Amber hadn't changed at all, and she had just shown him even more clearly who truly belonged in his world and who didn't. He turned away, saying nothing. Amber walked out looking satisfied, believing she had planted a seed of doubt. But Amber didn't know. Ethan wasn't doubting Lena. He was beginning to doubt her return. And from that moment on, the mansion on the Aspen hillside became the quiet battleground of two women, one with nothing but a genuine heart, and one with nothing but a polished facade. A battle no one predicted, but everyone could feel what was coming. Ever since that conversation, Amber seemed to change her strategy. She no longer showed open irritation toward Lena. Instead, she behaved gently, softly, so much so that an outsider might easily believe tension had never existed in this house. But beneath every smile, every glance Amber gave, there was a thin mist of coldness, as if she were calculating her next move step by step. One Saturday morning, while Ethan was still in his study, Amber walked down to the kitchen, where Lena was folding napkins. The soft sunlight reflected off the glassware, making the room look much more peaceful than it actually was. Amber chose that exact moment to begin. "Lena," she called, her voice unusually friendly. Lena looked up. "Yes, ma'am?" Amber leaned lightly against the kitchen counter, her posture soft and graceful, like a well-meaning older sister. "Next weekend is Ethan's birthday. I want to host a small, cozy party. He deserves a nice surprise." Lena smiled sincerely. "Mr. Caldwell works very hard. I'm sure he'll be happy." Amber's eyes flickered with something faint, an emotion that wasn't agreement nor shared joy, but something more like irritation hidden beneath a thin silk veil. "Yes," Amber whispered. "And I need someone to help with the serving. I think you're the most suitable." Lena paused slightly. "Ma'am, I've never served at an upscale party before. I'm afraid I—" Amber cut in with a reassuring smile. "Oh, don't worry. You're very graceful and polite. You'll only need to serve drinks, collect glasses, very simple. I'm certain you can do it." It sounded like praise, but something in Amber's eyes made a chill run down Lena's spine. Still, her sense of responsibility made her nod. "If you trust me, I'll do my best." Amber touched her shoulder lightly, a gesture performed with perfect friendliness. "Thank you. I know you won't disappoint me." But as Amber turned away, a half-smile crossed her lips, fleeting, but enough to reveal that this kindness was anything but innocent. The following week, Lena continued her work as usual, trying not to overthink. But Ethan noticed something strange. Amber was endlessly on phone calls, discussing details with friends, sending emails, ordering food from high-end restaurants in Denver, and even hiring a few bartenders to test cocktails. She kept saying it would be a small gathering, but her preparations looked more like an event for the wealthy elite. One evening, when Lena came to the study with her notebook to ask about cleaning tasks, she paused outside the door, hearing Amber's voice inside. "Don't worry, everything will be perfect, and the guests will know exactly who belongs where in this house." Ethan responded with clear suspicion. "Amber, I don't want the party to go overboard. It's just my birthday." Amber let out a soft laugh. "Ethan, you deserve a grand celebration, and it'll be interesting to see how some people adapt to a new environment." Lena froze at the doorway. She didn't quite understand who Amber was targeting, but that voice, sharp, icy, made a shiver run through her. Ethan sensed something off in Amber's elaborate preparations, but he couldn't piece everything together yet. All he had was a vague unease. Amber was planning something, and it wasn't good. The night before the party, Ethan and Amber had dinner together. Amber lifted her wine glass in the candlelight, her red lips curved into a flawless smile. "Tomorrow will be wonderful," she said, her eyes hiding a sweet but dangerous secret. Ethan frowned. "Amber, what exactly are you planning?" "It's just a party, Ethan," she replied, but her smile said something entirely different. Meanwhile, Lena, trying on the simple outfit she had borrowed from a neighbor to prepare for the event, had no idea that tomorrow she would be standing at the center of a stage that Amber had been building for a long time. A grand stage, filled with lights, and filled with eyes ready to judge. The next afternoon, aspen snow fell in thin layers, as if warning that something was about to happen. Lena arrived at the mansion earlier than usual, carrying an old cloth bag holding the outfit she'd borrowed from a neighbor. Simple, clean, neat, and the best she could prepare for a fancy party she had never served at before. Amber was in the kitchen when Lena walked in, her smile soft like the foam on a cappuccino, but cold as stone. "You're here, Lena. You look tidy." Lena only bowed her head in thanks. Amber looked at her like someone evaluating a decorative item temporarily placed in the wrong spot, then continued. "There'll be many guests today. Please serve the drinks and remember to be gentle. Don't draw attention. This is a party for people who observe everything." Her voice was even but had the sting of a needle touching skin. Lena didn't respond, only offering her usual polite smile. From the second-floor railing, Ethan watched. He saw the stiffness in Lena's shoulders, the forced smile on her face, and Amber's artificial comfort spreading through the room like a thin, toxic mist. He wanted to come down, wanted to say something to make Lena feel at ease, but he remained still, afraid that his presence would only make Amber strike harder. By 5 o'clock, the mansion grew lively. Luxury SUVs glided over the snow, bringing New York executives, Denver lawyers, doctors, investors, people used to expensive wine, crystal lighting, and gatherings where everyone silently judged one another. Lena walked among them, carrying a tray of drinks with hands she tried to keep steady, her steps humble yet dignified. To most guests, she was invisible, just another moving servant silhouette. But Amber noticed every movement, not to appreciate, but to wait for the moment Lena stumbled. Half an hour into the party, whispers floated through the air. "Who's that woman?" Probably house staff. She looks so out of place. Lena heard some of it, but she only bowed her head and kept working, as she had for years, accustomed to the gazes of people who believed worth was measured by designer shoes. From across the room, Ethan saw all of it. He saw Lena trying to stay composed, saw her shoulders tighten with each mocking remark, and watched Amber observing her like a director overseeing a play she had staged. By 8 o'clock, Amber stepped into the center of the room, lifted her champagne glass and tapped it lightly. The crisp clink silenced the entire space within seconds. "I just want to say a few words," Amber began, her voice charming and graceful, but Ethan could hear the cruelty beneath every syllable. "We're here for Ethan, a wonderful man, and tonight I want to honor him, as well as the important values in a home." She turned her head, scanning the crowd, her gaze like a blade sliding across faces until it landed on Lena. "Lena!" Amber called, her voice silky but loaded with intent. "Come here and assist me." Lena walked forward, each step feeling like it pressed onto thin ice. She stood before Amber, and before dozens of eyes judging, curious, dissecting. Amber smiled, tilting her glass. "Everyone, this is Lena, the cleaner of this home. Very hard-working." The words sounded like praise, but hit the room like a nail driven into wood. "Lena," Amber continued, "tell me, do you feel comfortable at a party like this? In a space that isn't really yours?" The air thickened. Lena tightened her hand around the tray to steady herself. She took a deep breath. "Ma'am," she said softly but clearly, "I am here to do my job, and I believe that honest work never makes anyone less valuable." A few people fell silent. Some stared down at their glasses. Some avoided her gaze. Amber, however, only smirked. "Of course. But you understand. Some circles simply aren't meant for everyone." A few low chuckles sounded, sharp, like metal scraping stone. Just as Lena turned slightly, a glass on her tray tilted, only a little, but under dozens of eyes it became a glaring mistake. Several drops of champagne fell onto the wooden floor. Amber lifted a hand to her chest, feigning concern. "Oh, careful, Lena. Parties like these require finesse." Another ripple of laughter. Small, but enough to make Lena's heart tighten. And right at that moment, Ethan set his glass down, hard enough to make several guests flinch. He stepped forward, his eyes colder than the snow outside. The music still played, the lights were still warm, but the atmosphere had shifted entirely, and everyone knew. Something was about to happen. The sound of Ethan placing his wine glass on the table rang louder than the music, making several nearby guests freeze. Amber turned her head, her smile still intact, but her eyes darkened for a split second, so brief that anyone not paying attention would miss it. The entire room seemed to stop moving as Ethan walked forward, step by slow, commanding step, as if he weren't just approaching Lena, but approaching the right thing he had avoided for years. "Amber," Ethan said, his voice low and sharp, instantly silencing every whisper. "What did you just say?" Amber tilted her wine glass, showing no fear at all. "Ethan, I was just reminding everyone about suitability. I think—" "No," Ethan cut in. "You're belittling someone who doesn't deserve it." A few guests raised their heads. Some instinctively covered their mouths in shock. Amber tried to maintain her smile, but it had turned rigid. "Ethan, you're overreacting." "Overreacting?" Ethan stepped closer, his gaze burning through the air between them. "You just humiliated an honest woman, a woman who works with her whole heart, and you think I'll stand here and watch?" Every eye in the room shifted to Lena. She stood there, hands gripping the tray, chest rising slightly as she fought to stay calm. But she didn't say a word. She didn't need to. Everyone felt it. Ethan turned to the guests and spoke clearly. "Did you know? Lena is the first person in 15 years to find money in my house and not take it. Not a single dollar." The room fell into a silence heavy as stone. "She found the $20,000 I left on the table, and the first thing she did was arrange them neatly, then leave a note. She is more honest than anyone I've ever hired." Amber's face drained of color. Some guests exchanged awkward looks, realizing they had unknowingly taken part in Amber's cruel performance. And meanwhile, Ethan turned fully to Amber, his eyes cold and aching like an old wound torn open. "You came back here because the richer man you chose someone else. And you think that gives you the right to humiliate others to feel superior?" Amber breathed sharply. "Ethan, I didn't—" "Don't say another word." His voice was calm but carried undeniable authority. "Tonight, you didn't make me proud. You only reminded me why our marriage could never continue." A small gasp slipped from a corner of the room. A few guests took subtle steps backward as if avoiding the epicenter of an emotional earthquake. Ethan turned to Lena. His gaze softened, like someone discovering something pure after years of doubt. "Lena, you did nothing wrong. Absolutely nothing." Lena opened her mouth to respond, but her throat tightened. She could only nod slowly, her eyes slightly red, but her dignity completely intact. Amber looked around and noticed several guests now watching her differently, no longer impressed, but uncomfortable and distant. It was the look someone like her feared most. She clenched her hands, teeth pressing together behind a forced smile. "I think the party should go on. We shouldn't make this a big—" "Amber," Ethan said, his voice low but loud enough for the entire room. "The party is over." Silence froze solid. No one moved. No one dared break it. Amber blinked, confusion, then anger, then hurt flickering across her proud face. "Fine," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "If that's what you want." She placed her wine glass on the table and turned away. The guests watched her leave, none saying a word. Left behind was Lena, standing still under the warm golden lights in her simple uniform, hands still holding the tray. But she stood straight, strong, not bowing her head to anyone. Ethan looked at her for a long time, and in that moment, the entire room understood. The woman who had just been humiliated in front of everyone was the only one walking away from this night with her honor completely intact. And in that moment, everything in their lives began to change. When the last door of the party closed, the enormous mansion suddenly became so quiet that even breathing could be heard. The guests had left with awkward expressions. A few nodded discreetly at Ethan to show support. In contrast, others avoided his eyes, afraid to be caught in a confrontation they were not used to taking responsibility for. In the corner of the room, the warm yellow lights reflected off half-finished glasses of wine, creating a scattered scene of luxury mixed with chaos. Lena was still standing there, her hands gripping the tray, which had grown cold. She didn't know what to do, whether she should apologize, leave, or simply stand still until someone told her her work was done. But before her thoughts could take shape, Ethan walked toward her. "Lena," he said softly, his voice so gentle it was almost a sigh. "Are you all right?" She opened her mouth, but her voice stuck somewhere in her throat. In the end, she only shook her head slowly, not because she was weak, but because she had stayed strong for far too long. Ethan reached out, not touching her, just placing his hand lightly on the edge of the tray to help her lower it onto the table. "No one is allowed to speak to you like that," he said quietly. "No one." Lena lowered her gaze, trying to stay composed. "Sir, I don't want to cause trouble." "You didn't cause anything," Ethan replied immediately. "The fault lies with those who think they have the right to determine someone else's worth." Across the room, Amber stood alone. She hadn't left yet. Her perfectly applied makeup was now marred by anger and humiliation. She looked at Ethan and Lena as if seeing two traitors, though only one person had betrayed anyone tonight, and it certainly was not Lena. "Ethan," Amber spoke, her voice trembling slightly, "we need to talk." Ethan turned toward her, his eyes calm and cold enough to make Amber breathe deeply to steady herself. "Tomorrow," Ethan said. "Not now." "You're sending me away?" Amber asked, though she already knew the answer. "I'm telling you to take time, to think about what you did." Amber bit down on her lip, holding back the tears, not because she felt remorse, but because she understood something. For the first time in years, her pride had been shattered, and in front of everyone. She lifted her handbag, straightened her back, and walked out of the mansion on heavy, high heels, carrying her wounded vanity with her. The door closed behind her with a dry, final thud, like a period marking the end of a sentence. Now, only Ethan and Lena remained in the vast room. Lena looked around, her eyes dimming as if she were apologizing to the house itself for letting Amber's cruel words linger in the air. "Mr. Caldwell," she said softly, her voice steadier now. "Thank you for standing up for me. I really don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Ethan replied, his eyes softening in a way even he wasn't aware of. "Lena, you're not just someone I trust. You're someone who reminds me what kindness looks like." Lena lowered her head, but the corner of her lips lifted slightly, not out of joy, but because she could feel the truth in his words. Ethan watched her for a long moment, then continued. "Tomorrow, come a little earlier. There's something I want to discuss with you, something important." "Is it about the cleaning work, sir?" Lena asked quietly. "No," Ethan shook his head. "It's about your future." Lena stood frozen. She wasn't sure she heard correctly, but Ethan said nothing more. He simply turned away and walked toward the hallway, leaving her standing alone in the large room, where the last lights reflected on the wooden floor like small, fragile embers left after a stormy night. Lena watched Ethan's silhouette fade, her hand resting on her chest as if trying to steady the rhythm that had begun beating too quickly. She understood one thing. There are moments when life opens a door, silently, with no warning, and a person only realizes it when their heart trembles. That night, when Lena left the mansion, the snowfall had stopped. She looked up at the sky. The cold filled her lungs, but her mind felt clearer than ever. She didn't know what the next day would bring, but she knew one thing for sure. Her life had turned a page, not because she tried to climb a social ladder, but because she held on to something many wealthy people had long lost: integrity. The next morning, just as the sun peeked over the mountain ridge, its first rays slid down through the pine branches, coated with cold mist. Early mornings in Aspen were always so quiet that one could almost hear snow melting underfoot, and Lena walked into the mansion with a feeling she couldn't quite name. Even after sleeping only a few hours, she woke early as usual, tidy in her familiar uniform, hair tied neatly behind her head. Not knowing what awaited her, she took a deep breath, her hands still trembling slightly. Last night's incident hadn't left her mind, yet a different feeling stirred inside her, as if her life was shifting toward a direction she had never dared to dream of. When she entered the kitchen, Ethan was already sitting at the table, hands wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee. He didn't have his usual aloof demeanor. His face looked as if he had spent the whole night thinking. "Good morning, Mr. Caldwell," Lena said softly, as she always did. Ethan looked up. "Good morning, Lena. Please, sit." Lena hesitated. She had never sat in the owner's kitchen before, but his tone left no room for refusal, so she gently pulled out the chair and sat across from him. Ethan observed her for a few seconds, not with the probing eyes he had when they first met, but with the look of someone contemplating entrusting something important. "Lena," he began, "last night, I realized there are many things in my life I've never truly seen clearly." She didn't respond. She didn't want to interrupt. "You've worked for me with an attitude I have never seen in anyone else," Ethan continued, his voice slow and low. "Your integrity isn't just a trait. It's something that makes me want to be a better man too." Lena lowered her gaze, almost shy. "Sir, I'm just doing my job." "No." Ethan shook his head. "You're doing much more than that." A silence settled between them, not uncomfortable but grounding, letting the sincerity in his words fill the room. Then he said what Lena could never have expected. "I'm opening a new company, and I want to invite you to join, not as a cleaner. I want you to be an administrative assistant." Lena's head snapped up, her eyes widening. Time seemed to stop. The murmurs from last night's party vanished from her memory, leaving only this single reality. A new door was opening in front of her, vast, bright, and unimaginable. You mean that?" Lena whispered, her voice trembling despite her effort to steady it. "I've never been more serious," Ethan replied. "I believe you have potential. You'll need time to learn, and you'll need someone to guide you. I'm willing to do that. I want to invest in you." Lena placed a hand over her chest as if trying to steady her heartbeat. No one had ever said such words to her. Her whole life she had relied only on her hands to survive. No one had ever seen anything in her beyond physical labor. "But I've never worked in an office," she said honestly. I might make a lot of mistakes." "Then I'll teach you," Ethan said firmly. "We'll learn step by step. I don't need someone perfect. I need someone with character." On Lena's face, emotions swirled like a tablecloth stirred by a gentle breeze. Fear, surprise, gratitude, hope. A change that big wasn't something she could accept instantly, but her heart had already known the answer before her mind could process it. "You think I can do it?" Lena asked softly. Ethan leaned forward slightly, his gaze warmer than she had ever seen. "I don't think," he said. "I believe." A short sentence, but powerful enough to shatter every doubt Lena had ever held about herself. She inhaled deeply, clasping her hands together to contain the emotion rising within her. "If you trust me," Lena said slowly, "then I will try my very best." Ethan nodded, as if he had been waiting for those words for a long time. "Good," he said. "This Monday, you'll start." Lena smiled, a small, sincere, trembling smile, yet brighter than the morning sun pouring through the window. A smile of someone who, for the first time, could see a path out of the life she thought she would be stuck in forever. And in that moment, Ethan realized something he hadn't fully understood until now. He wasn't giving Lena an opportunity. It was Lena, with her kindness, who had helped him rediscover the best part of himself. Monday arrived faster than Lena expected. She stood in front of Ethan's newly rented office building holding a simple handbag, feeling as though the world was opening up before her. Yet her legs wanted to hesitate. The building wasn't huge, but modern. Its glass doors reflected the morning sunlight, making the place feel both unfamiliar and intimidating. "Lena!" Ethan called as he stepped out through the automatic doors. He wore a simple shirt, nothing extravagant, but his eyes carried unmistakable encouragement. "You're here." "Yes, I'm here," Lena replied softly, swallowing the knot of nerves rising in her throat. Inside the office, the scent of new paper, wood, and coffee blended, a feeling Lena had never known. Several cardboard boxes filled with documents still sat unopened, a brand new printer, a row of empty desks, and near the window, a small desk, neat and organized with a notebook and a new pen placed carefully on top. "This is your desk," Ethan said. "You'll help me organize the schedule, answer calls, handle simple emails. Step by step. No one expects you to know everything on the first day." Lena set her bag on the chair and touched the desk lightly as if testing to see if it was real. "Thank you, sir," she whispered. "I truly appreciate this opportunity." "You earned this opportunity yourself," Ethan replied. "I only recognized it." The morning passed in a whirlwind of new experiences. Lena learned how to answer office calls, take meeting notes, and professionally send emails. Everything was worlds apart from the kitchen towels, mops, or trash bins she had spent her life working with. At one point, she pressed the wrong button and the computer screen went black. Another time, she mistyped an email address, causing it to bounce back. More than once, she fumbled so much her face turned red and her hands shook uncontrollably. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, sir. It's all right," Ethan interrupted gently. So gently, it nearly made Lena want to cry. "I told you, no one knows everything on the first day." Still, by late morning, Lena felt like her head might explode. When she finally sat down in her chair, she let out a soft sigh, quiet but loud enough for Ethan to hear. "It's hard, isn't it?" Ethan asked. Lena gave a tired laugh with a trace of despair in her eyes. "It's so much harder than I imagined. I thought if I worked hard it would be enough, but here, I don't even know where to start." Ethan sat across from her, no longer looking like a boss, but simply a man speaking honestly. "Lena, when I started my first company, I didn't know anything either. The only thing that kept me standing was that I didn't give up. And I see that in you." Lena's eyes paused on him. Something faint, shimmering, hope, quietly took root inside her. In the afternoon, new challenges came again. The office phone wouldn't stop ringing, appointments overlapped, invoices needed processing. Lena mistyped a few more times, misread a couple of numbers, and even spilled some water onto her notebook. "Oh no, I'm so sorry, I'm so clumsy." Ethan handed her a tissue. "Lena, breathe. Everyone has spilled water before." Easy to say, but for Lena, someone who had always feared mistakes and feared disappointing others, every moment felt like a test. By 4 o'clock, she collapsed into her chair, hands covering her forehead. Not because she wanted to quit, but because she had never used her mind this intensely before. Ethan placed a cup of hot tea in front of her. "Look up," he said, his voice soft as wind. "You've done better than you think." Lena did look up. Her eyes were red, but her lips curved into a small, half-tired, half-proud smile. "I'm exhausted, but I don't want to stop," she said. "Something inside me tells me I have to keep going, no matter how hard it is." Ethan nodded, his eyes shining with unhidden pride. "That's exactly why I chose you." Her first day ended with the sky outside turning a deep violet blue of twilight. Lena looked at her desk, at the pages filled with messy handwriting, at the glowing computer screen, and realized that she had never felt herself moving forward this intensely in her life. On her way home, she touched her palm, still trembling slightly from the day's nerves. And then, walking along the snowy road, she smiled to herself. She knew she had stepped onto a path that would not be easy. But for the first time in her life, she believed she deserved to walk it. The weeks following Lena's first day passed like a book, opening page by page. Each day she learned something new: how to speak with clients, how to format an Excel spreadsheet, how to process invoices, and how to write polite emails. She made many mistakes, corrected many more, and each time she did, she got back up with a determination no one could extinguish. Ethan saw that, and the respect he had for her grew, like a seed that had finally found good soil. But during those same weeks, a quiet shadow returned to their lives. Amber. She didn't show up in person, but scattered text messages, phone calls Ethan declined, and rumors drifting through old acquaintances all told him one thing: Amber wasn't going to disappear quietly. One Friday afternoon, when the office was nearly closing, Lena was organizing papers when a luxury car stopped outside the glass doors. Amber stepped out. High heels, fur coat, eyes sharp as blades. Lena stood up immediately, her heart racing without knowing why. Amber entered the office as though she were stepping into a high-end gala. "Are you busy?" Amber asked Ethan, her voice sweet but icy. "We need to talk." Ethan stood, neither avoiding nor welcoming her. "Say it here." Amber glanced at Lena, then let out a thin, knowing smile. "She's still here?" Ethan didn't answer. He didn't need to. His eyes said enough. Amber let out a bitter laugh. "You traded me for a cleaner?" Lena lowered her head, trying not to react, but Ethan did. "No, Amber," he said slowly. "I walked away from you because you judge people by their status. And Lena reminds me that a person's worth is in their character." Amber's lips twitched, but this time her smile trembled. "You'll regret this," she whispered. "But not today." She turned, her heels striking the floor with the hardness of stone. When the glass door closed behind her, Ethan exhaled, a breath of release. And Lena, for the first time, dared to look directly at him. "Sir, I don't want to be the reason you lose anything." "Lena," Ethan said, meeting her eyes, "from the day you walked into my life, I realized I'd found something I'd lost." Lena parted her lips to ask what, but Ethan spoke first. Trust. 1 year passed. Lena was no longer the woman standing silently at that humiliating party. She was now an administrative manager, leading a small team and confidently presenting reports to business people she had once only served drinks to from afar. She completed her evening classes, not with the highest grades, but with the grades of someone who fought for every point with sweat and perseverance. Ethan was always proud watching her stand at the front of a meeting room, relying on no one, needing no one, strong, like someone who had finally found her rightful place. One late afternoon, near year-end, with the sunset falling over the Aspen Mountains, Ethan placed a stack of papers on Lena's desk. "This is your new contract," he said. "You'll become a senior manager." Lena froze. "Mr. Caldwell, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Ethan replied with a smile. "You've already done it all." Lena gripped the folder tightly. "You gave me an opportunity, but I had to walk the path myself," she said, her voice trembling but steady. "And I never thought I would make it here." Ethan looked at her for a long moment, then said softly, "Lena, you didn't climb up from a low place. You simply stood up from where others tried to put you down." In that moment, Lena turned her face away to hide her red eyes, not from sadness, but because sometimes kind words are almost too much for a heart used to being overlooked. That evening, standing alone before the city glowing beneath the mountains, Lena whispered to herself, "I used to scrub rooms where people looked through me like I was invisible. Now, I scrub away the doubts inside my own heart." She placed a hand on her chest and felt her heartbeat. Steady, proud. From someone humiliated in front of a crowd to a woman standing tall on her own strength. She did not seek revenge with bitterness. She did not return cruelty with cruelty. She answered only by becoming better. And as she watched snowflakes drift past the window, she smiled. The smile of someone who finally understands. Integrity doesn't make you lose. It only means you take longer to win. But that win is worth everything. If this story touched you, leave us a small sign, a like, a comment, or share it with someone who needs to be reminded that kindness still exists. And if you want to hear more life-changing journeys like this, come back to Deep Life Tales. Every week we tell a story, not to make you forget life, but to help you believe in it just a little more. See you in the following story.